It's back and bigger than ever. It's the unofficial 40 from Soonerscoop.com. Now, here's the entire Sooner Scoop crew. Carrie, Josh, Eddie, and Bob.
All right, we are back. It is the unofficial 40 podcast from Soonerscoop.com, and we've got a lot to talk about today as we are here doing an emergency pod and on the heels of a bombshell announcement yesterday. 23-year long head coach, or not head coach, assistant coach Cale Gundy has resigned, did it late last night, just after 10:30. Rumblings were circulating around. We were all scared shitless that it was going to show up on the board all day Saturday.
All day Sunday.
And then we'd have to address it, and we were still trying to gather information. We did find out about it, that it had happened, and we're trying to gather more information because it's one of those things. It's a very sensitive situation. It ended up, it happened. Cale Gundy resigned because of it. And Josh, let me hit you up because you were one of the first one of us to kind of hear rumblings of this. But just a shocking conclusion to this thing.
I put something up on the board trying to put some perspective on it, and it's just this is what, like, guys, we were joking last week, and obviously we'll get into that about how calm this summer has been, and I guess this is what you deserve when you talk about shit like that. But if you would, like, if there was a bingo card of what was possible in the season, like, this wouldn't have been one I'd have played. Like, I thought Cale Gundy was going to coach at OU until he was 70 years old. Like, he loved, like, and that's the worst part. Like, I was writing updates yesterday and kind of putting stuff out on Twitter. People were like, don't you think that it was like, it's too soon, Josh, it's too soon. I'm like, this is the job, man. Like, this is how this works. But it doesn't mean that I don't appreciate how huge this is. I mean, huge for him, huge for Oklahoma. It's a massive story.
Well, and it's also, just a personal blow. I mean, to everyone around the program. Eddie, we were sitting in the conference room eating lunch, and I still haven't seen it, but you said AD,
yes,
had said something on Twitter, and I was kind of waiting for that because they were so close, and Cale was so close with that whole family.
Yeah.
But Bob Stoops, came out and said something last night, and that these guys are heartbroken over this.
Yeah, it's shocking. I mean, it's just shocking in terms of, I think everybody knows what Cale Gundy's meant to the program. I think everybody knows kind of what he meant after Riley. Yeah, after Riley. And just going back in, I saw Kobe's dad, Will Truby, put something up this morning about just how integral he was, and he talked about it at the time back in January as far as what keeping this program together, and when everything kind of seems like it was falling apart, it sucks. And I think even worse part is having to sit here and talk about it because it's uncomfortable. It's shitty the way that it's all gone down. I think everybody knows it just can't happen though. But at the same time, you wish that you could find a way to just move on and wake up and think that it didn't happen. But it kind of is what it is, and it did happen. And the whole thing is just, it's the first kind of hiccup. Adversity, hiccup, roadblock, speed bump, whatever the hell you want to call it. It just sucks. It's a shitty situation, and it's unfortunate that 15 seconds of losing his mind in a way is going to ruin 30 years to what he meant to this university.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, you can go on the Crimson Corner now and see people arguing about, why did this happen? Like, why did it play out the way it did? We're not really here to defend one way or the other. It's just, it's one of those deals. When it was in that meeting room, it was in that meeting room. But once it got out of there, other people would hear it. They wouldn't have context of how it was said, when, what spirit it was said in.
Playing a game of telephone.
Yeah. It just becomes this thing. And I got to say, I mean, it doesn't make me look any differently at Cale Gundy, just personally.
Right.
I don't look at him any differently as a person.
I don't wake up this morning and think like he's some kind of raging racist. That's not a fact. It sucks that there's going to be a lot of people from the outside looking into what's happening here in Norman that in a way will feel differently. Like it will become this thing where he is turned into this big racist. And
I'll
it's
say
important that there's so many players have stuck up for him. And I think that's why, going back to like yesterday, I think we all kind of thought is like, at least I would say that I kind of characterize it as like, I'm sitting there last night kind of taking a deep sigh. It's like, okay, I think they're going to be able to navigate this somehow, whatever that direction may be. And then an hour later, we're dealing with the fallout of a resignation.
Yeah, it felt like maybe a suspension. I thought we were going to not have practice viewing today.
Sure.
So that when Cale isn't there, you don't notice, and then come back like a week later and he is there and everything looks fine. So, yeah, it was just a crazy 24, 48 hours.
Yeah, and it comes down to me, this is the most important thing. It's not about could he have survived this, should he have survived it. The fact is, Cale knew that this was going to cause too many problems. Like, regardless of how much time he spent in Oklahoma, I don't want to say he took a bullet, but, I mean, he knew how it was going to work out, what the reputation was going to be outside of Norman, outside of the players in that position group meeting, like in recruiting, like
right.
People would use that against him. Like you have a coach that is on. People are on record saying he said, the N-word.
Yeah, because you're going to have guys like Rodney Anderson and Joe Mixon who have gone through the battles with Cale. They're going to vouch for him. But what's that going to mean to like a 2025 wide receiver that has no connection to him at all, except what they're trying to build now? And this is one of the first things that he knows about who Cale is.
I mean, like, this is kind of, it's a little, it's just surreal because, I mean, I think of the history of OU and people doing stupid things to get in trouble. I think of, like, Josh Jarboe, the thing he had on YouTube before you knew you could get canceled for doing things on social media. Like, you go back to that stuff, and it's like all this stuff tends to happen, and it's not about, to me, it's not about placing blame. It's just about the fact that, you can do things in a split second that can ruin you. And, it's awful. It's not that I worry about that stuff for myself, but it could happen to me easily. I mean, look at the Lincoln Riley stuff. I mean, that I went through. So it's a terrible situation. I don't think it does us any good to argue whether it's right or wrong that you can get canceled for something. You just can't. It just is the way things are.
You guys touched on it perfectly, and it's something I put up on the board. If every time you're meeting a recruit, the first thing you have to talk about is this, that's a problem. Like, it just is, and I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying it's right.
Sure.
And I don't know, and people could say, well, 5 years from now, that won't be the case. Okay, great. What do you do till then? Like, there are parents who you're going to walk into a living room or think about offering a kid, and you already are out of that recruitment because they are not going to send their kid to you. And again, I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying there are people that feel that strongly about that, and you have to acknowledge that. Like I think Carrie, or I think it was Carrie that said it a second ago, and I know others have as well. It's dead right. It's why Cale did what he did. He didn't fight it. He didn't try to, build, player support to bring it, to keep him around. Like, he knew there's no good way this ends. This is going to go bad. And it's not good now. It could have been so much worse.
Look at it this way. He read a word that somebody else wrote.
Yep.
Do we need to rehash what happened?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
I think we do know what happened, but there's so many people out there that still are in the dark in a way. And it's like, how could reading comprehension and just evaluation of things is at an all-time low?
Just
you need
read Cale's statement.
Read what happened.
He
told you what happened.
Guys, and credit to him. Like, that, he could have been super vague, and he wasn't. Like, he laid out as much as he possibly could have, and he owned it. And I'm like, that is how you write something like that. Because you can't fault him for it. I mean,
and it's like there has to be
how he handled it.
People, I'm sorry, it did talk over you there. People are saying things like, there has to be more to the story. And there really isn't. I mean, that's just the world that we live in now. But, in the statement, if you didn't read it, if you didn't take the time, which, the guy basically, did the best thing that he could do for Oklahoma and lost his job for the university to make things right, to to where there wasn't going to be controversy. So just take the time and read his damn statement. I mean, that's the first thing I'll say. The other thing is, he was in a team meeting, a position meeting. One of his players was not paying attention, and Cale asked him to pay attention. And then it continued that the player was fidgeting with his iPad because they have notes on their iPad and they're doing film study. And I know, Eddie, you kind of told me more that you'd heard about. I'll let you take over.
I mean, I think it basically just comes down to, he basically asks the guys to get out their iPads, which is very common. They have everything on their iPad. They put all their notes on their iPad. You can go home and watch practice film on your iPad.
They send things to your iPad while you're doing film study.
That's right.
The coaches can send things to your iPad, send notes to you on the plays that they're talking about.
Yes. And, basically, I think anybody that has been in a film scenario or been in like a team meeting or something like that knows that, somebody's playing grab ass or like jacking around, not paying attention. He went back to him and was like, hey, pull this up. And then 10, 15 minutes later, went back to the same player, said, basically asked him, where do you need to be on this route or this concept? And the player couldn't tell him because he obviously didn't have his notes out. I was told that Cale basically told him, like, it's in your notes. If you have the notes up, you should be able to tell me. And I think that's what, to a lesser extent, triggered him in a way where he took the iPad up. It was put on the board in front of him, and then he read aloud what was on the iPad, and it happened to be, 2 sentences, and there was 2 racial slurs in it. And I think everybody kind of knows what that means. Like, he said the N-word twice, and I think that was,
and
like,
was
one
immediately
of those moments
mortified.
Like, holy shit, what did I just say in front of all these people? And, I think that there was a sense of everything was almost kind of taken care of within that room. Like, I don't think that the wide receivers...
This was Thursday, right?
I think it's either Thursday or Friday morning.
Okay.
I was told it was Friday morning.
Friday morning
when I was initially,
they're trying to go through all this shit, like put it in before the start of camp. This is the first time they're going out to the practice field. And then all of a sudden, this happens. I think they got out to the practice field. And I think everybody kind of thought, not necessarily that it was over by any means, but I think there was an understanding, like everybody that was in the room that knew the context of what was happening. And nobody's like sitting here. I don't think any 4 of us are saying he shouldn't be disciplined. He shouldn't be, something shouldn't have happened to Cale. It can't go unchecked, unadvised, whatever. But I think that there is like a certain element of, I think that everybody that was in the room, all 15 guys or whatever that is in that wide receiving core, including Cale and the 2 other coaches that were in the room, understand what had happened. And then it grew into a life of its own. And that's where we are today. That's why everything that happened after 10 o'clock last night, it's just like, holy shit, what did, like, and I think that's why it is very normal. Like, it's a very normal response to go, well, what am I missing here? Like, if the players all have vouched for the guy, if, everybody was willing to move on and accept the apology in some regard, which I believe a majority of the football team is willing to do that, why did it end in a guy tendering a resignation?
After
days later.
That's the question you asked, but the answer is, well, SAE.
A little bit, right?
The professor that said the N-word in the class. All the Black Lives Matter stuff, like the marching, all that. Like, the football team was in the middle of all that. So now the rest of the campus is going to watch, and they find out that you had a coach that said the N-word.
That's selective. Yeah, like, you can't be selective.
But you're not going to march on that. Like, it would have caused all kinds of problems across campus.
With his trying to instill the culture, accountability. Accountability is a word we've heard like 1,000 times.
And what a terrible, awful spot it is for Brent Venables to look at now. And you're trying to get through literally the first week of practice, and you're having to deal with, the discipline of a assistant, a guy that is supposed to be
that you've known forever.
Right,
it's not like
on your
one
side.
Of these first-year coaches you just brought in.
Sure.
And as Bob said, held things together in the middle of chaos when nobody else could.
You've got to think Cale was among his first calls. Like, I want you on this staff. I mean, if this isn't a guy, I mean, they clearly have a really strong relationship. So I can't imagine that for Brent. That's a brutal decision.
Yeah, everybody that I've talked to has the same reaction. And it is, I think it's kind of the same reaction that we all had. It's like, holy shit, what happened? Oh my God, I can't believe that's true. And like, there's like this, I don't know about you guys, but there's this sense of like anger, and then it's just like well, shit. Like this is, it's pretty, I woke up this morning too thinking like, because of the steps that they made, is there a path to reconciliation? And I just don't know how you get there.
The problem is it would take time.
Yep. Sure.
And people outside of the program aren't going to give them the time.
Oh, that's right.
It's just going to be noise, and it will make it worse and worse. And I hate it. I hate it. I don't think it's right. Everybody knows, I hate cancel culture stuff. But it's a bunch of people that have, it's like everything else. No one has a personal relationship with any of these people. It doesn't matter to them. It's just, he said something, he should be gone. Like there's never any, when this stuff happens, there's never any thought for the people. And that's the hard thing.
Yeah.
And I hate it. It's not right, but it just is the way that it is. And it's stupid. I agree with everyone who thinks it's stupid, but there's nothing you can do about it. It's just the world we live in.
No, it is. And, I think that as soon as it happened, I think that there's a certain element of everybody that kind of knew which way this was going to go. Probably everybody hoped that it wasn't going to go this way. But it just, it sucks. And then it sucks even more having to talk about it for 4 hours on the radio or come in here and have to have this conversation with you guys because it is uncomfortable. And, I think that there is like a certain element of, like, let's be honest, being a white guy, like I've never had to endure that, like I can't put myself into that spot. So I can't imagine. I can't sit here and tell you all how to think, but it's a situation that, we obviously, like, I was obviously joking, but anything other than this would have been something that I would have loved to have talked about. It's just shitty.
Well,
and that opens up like this whole new like pathway, Carrie, of it's 25 days before kickoff. Like,
yeah,
like this isn't a spot now, and moving forward with LaDamian Washington and he's the interim wide receivers coach. In case you didn't know, we saw him out today at practice. It just is. It's like one of those deals. He's going to have to be the interim. I don't think. There is like this gateway where you can go recruit a coach who's now working his job already. Like
getting ready
camps
for
have
his
started
season,
across the country. There is no wide receiver coaching pool that you can choose from right now.
Well, and the bad thing is, Jeff Lebby's in here as new offensive coordinator, but we've all talked about it so much. Like Cale Gundy, when's he going to become an offensive coordinator? When's he going to take it over? Like you're losing a wealth of offensive knowledge in Cale Gundy too that Jeff Lebby could have had, to tap into. And he's got Joe John, who he's been with for a long time, but it's not like you just have, DeMarco certainly knows football, but younger guy. Like Cale Gundy had a real place on this staff that it's a hole that just can't be filled.
Yeah, it wasn't just a nostalgia thing. Oh, it's great because he's been around the program for years and years. He had the knowledge. He was going to help in a massive way. We did get to watch Washington for about 45 minutes this morning. He looked comfortable. He understands this is his role now. It wasn't like Jeff Lebby was there holding his hand or Brent Venables was watching LaDamian to see if he could handle it. So it's just something we'll have to learn. We're all going to find out together whether or not how well he can coach. Josh, I feel like he's going to be able to recruit pretty well just based on the interactions we had with him during the on-campus camps throughout the course of the summer and what receivers have said. But it's just a whole lot of questions unknowns that we can't answer as of today.
Oh, with him and recruiting, you're absolutely connecting dots. You don't know. There's no way to know. He's never been the guy who's the spear, I guess the tip of the spear in recruiting. Like he's never had to be that in the receiver room. Now, what you can connect seems amazing. Like it seems like the recipe for a really good recruiter. Young guy, very energetic, has got NFL background, both as a player, as a coach. He has a lot of interesting kind of angles he brings to recruiting. And like I said, I've talked to plenty of players, before this, and obviously there's been a few conversations over the last 12 to 18 hours of, what some of the guys at OU's recruiting think about all of this. But even before that, there's absolutely been I talked to Coach Washington. I really like him. He's really been big on getting to know me and kind of building a relationship with my family. I mean, it hasn't just been Cale that's talking to these guys. So that's why I think the alarmist stuff where it's like, OU's going to lose Keon Brown and Petaway, and it's all like, it seems extreme right now because the story's so big, and that's the way everybody always reacts when a coach leaves in December. Yeah, okay, that's tricky. I mean, and again, not Lincoln Riley. Just like a normal position coach makes a move in December, everybody's pretty used to that. That happens all the time. This is so unusual. It creates kind of an alarm on the corner, and everybody tends to go worst case scenario. It'll be okay. Like it may not be perfect. They may not sign all three guys that they either have committed or I think they're going to land, prior to yesterday evening. But I still think it's going to be okay. This isn't going to be a seismic shift for this recruiting class.
It might have been just the Missouri connection, but J.J. Hester told me flat out that his conversations were with Washington initially before it went to Cale and Levy when they were going through the portal process.
Well, and let me go back to this because I think this is important to say and for people to hear. Like, it does no one any good to try and out who the player was in this instance. I mean, I know people want to know. People are already demanding to know on the corner. I'm sure OU Twitter is going to go on their own little witch hunt to try and figure out who it was that had that on his iPad that Cale read from. But like from what I've been told, the person responsible feels worse than anyone. Like it's not like I know it was a guy that wasn't paying attention in class, basically, but. Think about being the guy that got a coach fired because of your actions. Like, I would be surprised if that person, finished out at OU.
You gotta be mentally tough to not hit the portal now.
Yeah, I mean, it's just what that kid must be going through. I mean, it's got to be awful. So, I don't think it does any good to go out on a witch hunt and try and identify who this was or demand to know. Or even spread the rumor about who it is, or it's an awful situation. The kids have to grow up; they have to learn, how to be responsible. This is a really tough lesson for somebody to have to learn. DeMarco
Murray just put out a Instagram post with a statement, which is, I guess, interesting in a way, just because that's the first time we've heard from
another coach,
active
coach.
And I think it's safe to say that we've all in one form or another heard something that this player didn't want this to happen. This wasn't like him pushing it or him being upset. Like this had nothing.
That's right.
And that's why the witch hunt, if it ever did begin, is just not fair. Like he made a mistake in the team or position meeting. That's fine. But this isn't like something he pushed or was responsible for. Like, no, he didn't want this either, from everything I've gathered.
I don't think any of the players wanted it. No, but it was out of their control.
I haven't talked to anybody who
I was told last night.
This was right.
I was told last night, a couple hours before the resignation, like the players were under the impression that he wouldn't be fired, but there would be some suspension served. That was their. But then, my thinking was, well. Unfortunately, it's not up to the players, and we can go over all day like where it went. I will say this: did learn something last night. I was told, that from people that have dealt with the racist issues in the past on campus, that anytime a racist issue is known before the public finds out about it, they send out this campus-wide alert for this is going on. If you would like to talk to someone, counselors are available. We have,
Would that still be in action, though, even though school hasn't technically began?
That's true.
There's no students. Yeah. I don't know.
I have no idea.
That's possible, too. Yeah. So, but I'm just saying, I don't know if this went all the way to the president. I don't have any indications that was the case. I think Cale felt like this was just something that had to be done because the talk continued to go up the chain, and he knew probably the eventual outcome.
No one man's bigger than the program. That's what we heard for months and months. That's another example of it.
It just sucks because he's given as much as anybody.
100%.
To not be able to be given a second chance based on those circumstances, it's tough to swallow. I understand that.
Yep.
And I know people will feel like, well, why couldn't you just suspended him for the year? Or like we were talking earlier about, maybe there could be a reconciliation. Again, you still have to come back to, well, why weren't you, like when he's sitting in the living room, why weren't you with Oklahoma for the last year? Some kid that doesn't know the story, doesn't know anything about it. Then you've got to explain it. And again, I know that seems like nothing to people. Having to have that conversation with people that, I just read DeMarco's Insta. Like, people that know him know that's not what he's about. People that don't know him and don't have time and life, invested in him, that it's not the same. Like, they're going to look
easy
at it
to
differently.
Discount it,
Yes,
is just
absolutely.
Discount
Fair
him
or not,
as just a racist.
it just is. Yep, absolutely. And I mean, I'm not saying that's fair or right. I'm saying that's reality.
Well, regardless of what we say, what you guys say out there on social media, Crimson Corner, it's done. I mean, I know there's going to be this little groundswell of, somebody talk some sense into the athletic department and bring him back. That's just not going to happen.
And I think that's why it's actually important to get back to the practice field today, and for us a little bit to see it, because it felt like normal practice.
Yeah, it did.
Nothing felt off about it.
Good intensity, good physical contact for a lot of guys. If you would have dropped me down there not knowing what we knew, I would never have been able to tell. And now what does that mean when practice is over?
Closed door
and you get
meetings
up to the
and
locker
stuff.
room?
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot.
Those players that were out there today really hadn't had time to process this. I mean, I'm sure some of them were already in bed when that was done. I mean, like, you wake up in the morning like Coach Gundy resigned. Like, now is when they're processing it. So that's what you were like. Is this going to have ripples in the team and the team chemistry and the fiber of the team, their togetherness? Like, is this going to cause a divide? We don't know that yet. I mean, that's to be determined.
You would think if things were as strong as they claim it to be over the last 4 or 5 months, you can navigate these waters through a little bit of togetherness and everything like that. But I mean, this is definitely something, and it's one of those issues that I think they're everybody's gonna have their own opinion about.
And that there's a little, we talk about the logic to it. You do it now. Students aren't even on campus, so it's not like it's being talked about. They arrive in 2 weeks. It'll still be talked about some, but you're given a 2-week buffer zone of where you can process it in your own way before all your classmates start, asking you about it or giving their opinion about what they thought should have happened.
Well, and the other thing too is, and I hate to even put it like this because saying the word is saying the word, and it's obviously wrong, but it's not like he was accusing somebody or like calling somebody that name.
He didn't do it with malice.
Right.
Yeah.
And it, can't take it back though. It's like 15 seconds have literally ruined 30 years of his coaching because of a stupid ass decision on his part.
And let's face it, I mean, you guys are younger than me, but we've all been in situations where we've listened to music, we're with other people, and you're singing those words, and you can't even do that anymore.
Yeah.
Like, that's...
Well, if you need to know, like, what former players or current players think of Cale Gundy, I don't think that it's very hard to get on the social media machine and see the outpouring of support that has come his way. But again, it's just like, I can't imagine being Brent Venables and having to be in that situation where you're having to decide and you haven't even come through, your first full week of practice and you're having to navigate maybe one of the bigger stories to come out of this thing in a while. And that's saying something compared to considering all the shit that we've had to talk about here over the last couple of years.
Well, I don't know.
It sucks.
Yeah,
I mean,
it sucks. It's
like there's no end inside of like, okay, you can find your like way to get to this valid. There's no excuse. Like
it's just all bad.
At the end of the day, it's kind of like what DeMarco put in his statements. Like what happened or what was said in the position meeting room just can't happen. It can't happen.
All right, I think that's it for the emergency pod. We're going to be back again.
2 for 2 on emergency pods. Last week was a little bit more exciting than this one.
Double Monday emergency pods. What will the? I'll say this: you can't blame us because we didn't have the Doom pod. Like
I would let Josh, if you want to speak on Anthony Evans, Jaquez Petaway, Keon Brown.
Yeah, Keon Brown was the first one I heard from last night. And I can tell you there was no roll, like let's talk to the recruits before this gets out here. None of that happened. This was everybody found out at the same time. And when I talked to both Petaway and Brown, they were asking me as much as I was asking them because they didn't know if it was real. Petaway was like, is that statement real? I mean, they really was just a total mystery for those guys. They were totally blindsided by it. Brown did tell our guy Adam Gorney, I'm solid, I'm locked in. He acted like there was no reason to be concerned. Petaway talked to Nick Harris a little bit more than he did me. Petaway knows Nick, has a good relationship there. And I got the impression that there was very real concern last night. That him and the people around him were worried. Now, I will say they're going to take a few days, talk to OU, kind of hear, all that they need to hear. So it's not going to be a rush thing. I don't expect you to hear an announcement today or anything like that. But if a decommitment happened, it wouldn't shock me. Now, at the same time, like I was telling you guys before we got started, I don't think OU would be eliminated. I probably would still bet on OU as the favorite, to be perfectly honest. He likes OU a lot. It wasn't just about Coach Gundy. There was a lot there that he liked. So I think OU could get back in that race and possibly win it. I don't think it's, he's going to Texas. Like that's not realistic.
Josh, how is his relationship with Levy?
The thing that helps OU a lot is that's Levy's area. Levy he's been to Houston a lot. So there is familiar. It's not just like, he's the guy I've seen a couple of times. I've gone to Norman. There is an actual relationship there. Petaway's kind of a quiet kid. He's kind of kept to himself. So that's the trickier part is because I'm sure he does have a lot of connection and affinity for Gundy, and he's a guy that I don't think makes those relationships really easily. But at the same time, like we talked about after he took as a Texas official, he didn't love that trip, and I don't think has ever really warmed to that staff. So, or at least not in the same way as Oklahoma. So I think Oklahoma can fix it. I think it can be okay. Although, like I said, if there is some, if he doesn't fully, if OU doesn't know their verdict with him until National Signing Day, that won't shock me. Like I think there is room for question, but I do think I don't think it's a done deal. I don't think he's gone or anything like that. We'll just have to kind of see where it plays. The last is Anthony Evans, and he's the one that's talked to me the most about the relationship he has with LaDainian Washington. He really likes him, talked about him as a guy he talks to a lot, a guy he has a lot of trust in. There's no question. I mean, you lose a guy like Cale, great recruiter. The guys love him. I mean, there's just no question. That is going to have to be overcome. At the same time, with Anthony, he really likes Oklahoma. I've gotten the impression he kind of likes the distance OU is, kind of far enough, but not so far like Georgia, those kind of schools. So I still think OU's in good shape. We got to kind of see where this plays out. To my knowledge, at this point in time, LaDainian Washington does not talk to any of those three guys. Now, I'm going to check back after the pod, hope to have some more for the board as we go forward through the day. But there's still a lot to be discerned. But like I said, I don't think anyone needs to think, the building's burning down or anything. I think they're going to be fine with Keon Brown, and they still are probably the leader with both Petaway and Evans, however you want to look at their, commitment status at this moment.
And what a terribly just unfair situation Damian Washington's been thrown into now. Like having to it's the opportunity of a lifetime in one regard, but also a situation like just looking the way that he was interacting with players before practice started today. It was kind of like one of those moments of here goes nothing type thing.
Yeah. Sink or swim.
There's nowhere else to go. And I'm not saying that I don't think that he's ready or anything like that. It's just what a terribly unfortunate and just uncomfortable situation.
Well, there are going to be guys that say that because 2 years ago he was a middle school football coach.
Sure.
So there are going to be people say that he's not ready, he's not qualified. Gonna have to deal with it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll get to kind of impressions of viewing on Wednesday's pod and
Or Thursday.
Are you making the schedule now?
I think our media is going to be Wednesday.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
We can do it after Wednesday unless it's
we'll figure it out. So
whatevs.
All right. But that's it for this pod. Man, just a really tough 24 hours, 48 hours it's going to be for Oklahoma football. Our thoughts certainly go out to Cale Gundy and wish him the best. And, it's going to take some time, but hopefully we do see a rebound from him in coaching at some point. So thanks for listening. We'll check back in with you guys on Wednesday or Thursday, depending on when Bob decides we're going to have the next podcast. So thanks for listening to this emergency edition of the Unofficial 40 podcast right here on Soonerscoop.com.